Hello, so today we have Ian from Fenris Games.
Hello.
He is going to be talking about Rubble City 2.
2 is important.
Yep, and maybe a cheeky mention of Rubble City 1 during our conversation. You're not being interrogated, it's okay, it's just a conversation.
It's a void comp test.
Just a conversation.
Not a replicant.
So, tell us about Rubble City 2. What's happening? What is it?
Rubble City 2 is an expansion to Rubble City, which was our 2018 Kickstarter, which we made with a sculptor called the Lazy Forger. Made us a whole set of modular ruined city ruins. This is an expansion of those. We've gone on stuff that's compatible, that matches exactly and matches in really well with the existing sets that people have gotten. But what we've tried to do with this one is make stuff that's in one piece as well as retaining the modularity. So you can literally take a building straight out of the box and you've got a finished 4 walls with separate roofs and floors and that kind of thing.
Nice. So even though they're solid, there's still a degree of customization.
Exactly, yeah, because we've also got things like separate scattered rubble and objective markers, treasure markers, whatever, all in the same stonework. So you can scatter those around outside, inside the buildings and just make them look less ruined as you like.
How many buildings do we have altogether? In
this Kickstarter we've got 6 individual buildings in one piece, and then we've got 2 buildings which are modular ruins. So they're 4 corners which make up the outline or the footprint of a building, but you can mix and match those amongst each other for 64 combinations of 64 combinations of buildings. My maths may be wrong, I just picked that number out of the air.
And then with all the rubble and the different tile pieces,
exactly,
you can basically make thousands of them.
You can. There's enough in this current Kickstarter to easily fill a 2-foot square table, probably a 4-foot table to be fair.
Nice.
And you can either base them up permanently and make them permanent structures, or by adding in the Fractured Ruins set from the first Kickstarter, which is included on this one, you can go back to that modularity and build ruined walls, taller buildings, archways, doorways, all kinds of bits and pieces.
So I guess you could have the main new buildings as your sort of solid main part, and then use the bits of rubble just to sort of zhuzh it up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
How have you sculpted them? Did you sculpt them?
These ones are conversions, additions, and new sculpts based on and around the original Fractured Ruins set. So we've used some of the original pieces, but we've sculpted a lot, I've sculpted a lot of new pieces as well, and tried as best as possible to retain the original design, match everything in so it all works the same, looks the same, and fits the same footprints and height form factors.
So it's all physical sculpting?
It's all physical sculpts,
no digital.
No digital. There's 1 or 2 tiny little bits of digital for little components like torches and flames and that kind of thing, but it's all hand sculpted, hand finished, hand cast in resin.
Nice. That's quite a nice novelty these days.
These days, yeah, it's unusual to get something that's not vapor or digital or floating around in the ether.
So you actually get the physical buildings.
You actually get physical buildings.
Pretty much ready to go.
They are, and we cast them in a nice resin that you could literally just put a basic wash on and they would be good for almost instant play. But obviously, in an ideal world, you want to do some painting and finishing and make them look nice. So
they're all resin, all traditional,
everything's resin, everything's polyurethane resin, so good hard wearing, good solid reliable material. It's not like some of these modern polymer plastics, and PVC. It's not a PVC base, it's polyurethane. It's very tough, very strong, long lasting and hard wearing.
So it'll last you pretty much forever without,
pretty much
making that bold statement.
Yeah. I mean, it will certainly outlive some of us, but hopefully not all of our customers.
They will last a lifetime.
Yeah.
Excellent. So your buildings, what makes them new to the scene from, say people have been making buildings for 50 years or so, What are you adding?
Obviously there's loads on the market in terms of ready-made buildings with roofs, doors, all that kind of thing. And what specifically I wanted to do with Rubble City 1 and now with 2 is stuff that looks more like a city that's been left in ruins, and as you know, time and nature have started to take it over again. So there's a lot more in the way of collapsed or partially collapsed walls, partial roofs, partial floors, that kind of thing, rather than buildings which may as well be solid with a roof on or that kind of thing. So ideal for skirmish type games like Frostgrave, Mordheim, that kind of thing, or for anything else you might want to use them with. You know, I've tried to make them, or part of the design ethos for all of them has been to be period agnostic, setting agnostic, so they would work just as well for medieval as for early 20th century, Second World War, Bronze Age, you know,
cool.
You name
so
it,
they
really.
They could be used in the middle of a World War II battlefield.
Totally, yeah. There's, you know,
there's no fantasies.
There's
or
no elements
on
the main buildings that are fantasy or setting specific. There are bits in some of the add-ons like the treasure markers, the objective markers, which are more specific, but
they're optional.
They're all optional. They're not. You don't
full
need to.
Just brick and wood, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, the piece I've got here in front of me is pretty much it's the basic building is the footprint, but then I've added piles of block scatter around it just to make it, and inside as well, and then a little ruined partial floor there as well, just to make it all look a bit more unique.
What I really like about it is that the bricks are all nice and irregular.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of thought that's gone into it,
yeah.
And I imagine a lot of research, long hours and long evenings staring at bricks.
Definitely. Well, my previous job before Fenris was as an architectural model maker. Also worked with museums, special effects for film, TV, that kind of thing. But a lot of that involved obviously studying architecture, working with architects, working with developers, reading a lot of that kind of theory as well. So yeah, I know my way around buildings and how things work.
So some of those lovely dioramas in museums are actually your making?
Yes, I've got models in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington DC.
Wow.
I've got models in the Natural History Museum in Jorvik, in various theme parks like Euro Disney, Cadbury World, Dickens World, lots of places. Yeah.
That is very impressive. So you do know what you're doing. You've not just,
yeah, that's the rumour.
How many years have you been doing all this?
Professionally, I've been a model maker for 36 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've been model making quite some time.
Quite some time, yeah. So I kind of know what I'm doing by this stage, I hope.
So people who back this Kickstarter, they get the buildings.
They do.
Obviously, you put them on the shelf for a few years, then maybe one day you paint them.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's generally how it works.
When they do paint them though,
yeah.
Do you have any tips, tricks, ways to sort of make it work? Because you've used, if you want to hold that up there, you can put it a bit closer to the lens as well. It'll do its funky autofocus. Look at that, perfect. So you can see that obviously he's painted the building, but we've got a whole heap of ferns and tufts and all that on top of it as well.
Yeah.
And also that's the blacksmith's place.
Yeah.
But there's some of the rubble scatter on the edge as well.
Yeah, there's rubble scatter on this as well.
Are there any of the floor? Yeah, you got the floor pieces.
And we've also got the ruined floor tiles in there as well, which is again part of the Kickstarter.
And then there's one of the sort of roofy pieces up there. Oh no, that's a decking.
Ruined decking. Yeah, there's a pack of ruined decking and there's a pack of partial ruined roof as well. Available as add-ons in the Kickstarter. So
really can customise them.
Yeah.
So what advice for someone that was a bit scared, going, I don't know how to paint, or
honestly,
where do I start?
The part of the beauty of this sort of style of stonework, and what I try and do with a lot of my scenery in general, is to make it, it's a cliche, but to make it almost paint itself. So if you've got enough texture sculpted into the original, dry brushing and washes will do most of the work for you. So this one was grey primer and then a sand base, and then selective washes. I mix my own washes, but you can use something like Army Painter or GW contrast paint.
I'm going to say the contrast would be good.
Yeah,
for this
contrast
sort of
would be good for that. I've used contrast in places for this, for pin wash and for picking out individual stones. In you see, there's a few different colours of stones. So
yeah, it adds a bit of
it just adds variety. If you know, when you look at real world ruins, especially in some parts of the world, there's a lot of field stone. It's not necessarily just local stone. You will find a mixture. So yeah, just to stop it looking quite so uniform and drab, just picking individual stones out either with a coloured dry brush or with pin washes in contrast or similar paints. And then dry brush up through several colours, a couple of browns, a couple of grey greens, a couple of greys, and finishing off with a last bit of white, really. It's
kind of hard to muck it up.
It is, yeah. It's
chuck a load of wash over it if it's going a bit wrong. There's not a great deal of thought goes into it, to be honest. You've got to just almost let the materials do the job themselves. The more you try and think about it, the more the human eye tries to put patterns on things. Your brain will form patterns without you subconsciously being aware of it. So you've just got to be fairly random with it. And that's where, also things like the planting, the growies, the grass, lift it up a bit so it can be
all that kind of thing will help as well. If you do make a little mess on your paintwork, you can always put a little bit of flock, moss, that kind of thing.
That's my trick.
Yeah, exactly. And that's obviously where things like your tufts and your laser cut plants and this kind of thing all come in handy as well.
They look very similar to the plants I stock
here.
They
do. Squiddo, funnily enough, they are Bad Squiddo, famous grass laser cut plants.
Nice.
They are lovely.
Nice.
They do the same job as the brass etch plants that we used to use for a lot of museum jobs, but they're a lot less fiddly to work with.
Nice. It's really good seeing them in because obviously I'm surrounded by them all the time, but I get to see them in some sort of context, in person, actual hobby stuff, which is ace. And what about the tree? Is that an add-on?
The tree was just something I found in the Bad Squiddo car park about an hour ago.
What?
So it's just a question of
an actual twig.
Well, there's actually 4 twigs making up something that looks like a tree on this front one, and there's another one at the back here.
So that's fun. Hey. So you can just go foraging pretty much.
Go foraging. I normally, certainly through the summer and autumn months when I'm walking the dog, as I spot little bits of twig or roots, especially woody roots are really good for trees. There aren't really any plants here in the Lenton Business Centre that are suitable, but you can see some of these vines and roots that are going around here that I've put some leaf scatter on. They are that's a plant called Spanish moss, Hollandia, I think is the Latin name, and you can buy that on lots of different sites, but eBay's the obvious one. You can buy it literally by the kilo from eBay, and that's just soaked in PVA and left to drape and to dry in place, and then again multi-level texturing with planting, so a little bit more of that moss texture, then some shrub texture, and then finished off with some dried leaf texture as well, just to give it a bit more zhuzh, to use your word. So, yeah.
It looks stunning.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It's why I've been sort of promoting this, throwing it around in everyone's faces.
Yeah.
I love going to ruins and looking around all sorts of overgrown ruins, and they just it's just a small scale version of that, and I've not seen anything that looks as realistic as those, which is why absolutely. And when I go to those, what I really like looking at is the bricks, because that's the life I have. Very exciting. I'm looking at the bricks, and going, look, they are irregular, they're different colours, some bits are chipped off.
Exactly.
It's not just, the case of
it's not machine
carving
made,
some lines
it's not
into
made,
anything.
It's individual hand dressed stonework.
And that little bit's just falling off everywhere. Absolutely love it.
That's what makes it, I think, is the sense that it's collapsing down is kind of what sells it as a real world location. We all like our games like The Last of Us or these kind of post-apocalyptic things where nature has grown up through buildings, and these really let you do that without too much effort at all.
I feel like I can crawl inside it and have a little explore, probably find a few old cans of Foster's or something.
Yeah, more than likely.
That's maybe that's, I would do tiny little cans of Foster's.
If you were doing post-apocalyptic, it's easy to dress them in a totally different way, so that they would equally work for that kind of thing.
So you can pretty much, well, you can use them for pretty much
Yeah,
anything.
I mean, Fallout, you know, games like Fallout or Zombicide, or, you know, anything where you've got that kind of post-apocalyptic thing going on, absolutely, they would be good for that kind of skirmish stuff as well.
Kind of all down to the accessories, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, you get yourself, you know, scale, I don't know, barrels or
Fosters.
baskets or, yeah, cans of Fosters, oil drums for more modern stuff, you know, all that kind of stuff that you can... Like I say, we've tried to make them setting and period agnostic so that you can do that specifically, and you could make those as separate add-on pieces or just keep them loose so that you can use it with several different periods ideally.
Without them being solid as well means you can actually play in them rather than just being objects. You know,
Yeah,
big
it's
hill
one of the
or
when I first looked at this new range, I initially thought about doing entire roofs, and then possibly solid versions or whatever, but then, as you said earlier, there's plenty of that kind of thing on the market already. And I just thought, no, actually, the whole ethos with Rubble City, the original, was that it was a ruined city. And yeah, ruined cities, you generally don't get weather-tight roofs and windows and double glazing. So, yeah.
You can game in and around.
Exactly. Yeah.
And with the extra bits of rubble as well, you can really build it so that it fits your figures. So if you've got slightly larger bases and things like that, you can make sure that they can fit onto the bits. So it's, again, not just decorative. It's,
and these little
playable.
pieces of extra rubble are individual, you know, they're not individual bricks, but they're little blocks of rubble. So there's no reason why you can't put those on individual little bases so that you can scatter things around as separate objective markers or bits of terrain. So
if someone's come into this brand new and they've never heard of Fenris and they go, these rubbles are cool, what's Fenris? What do you make? Is this your first building project?
It's certainly not my first building project. No, Fenris has been a hobby company since 2008 full time. I was doing it part time prior to that when I was still working in the film and museum industry. But yeah, since 2008, it's been a full time concern making all kinds of scenery, lots of resin scenery, lots of scenic resin bases, lots of laser cut scenery, lots of multimedia scenery. So not just laser cut on its own, but laser with resin, with timber, with plastic, with other materials, again, to make things just a bit more rounded as a finished model. We do lots of counters, markers, all sorts of bits and pieces.
Figures as well.
Yeah, obviously we do miniatures as well.
People might not know this though.
They might not. No, I mean, some people.
Hundreds of miniatures.
We've thousands probably. We were already doing miniatures for a long time prior to the game that kind of launched us onto a more global stage, if you like. We were the originators, the sculptors, and the owners of the models for Cthulhu Wars, and subsequently Cthulhu Wars 2, and for God's War, the RuneQuest board game. We've retained IP on all of those, so they're all those models are available from Fenris. But then we've got a lot of adjacent stuff, so lots of Cthulhu mythos, lots of old school D&D, lots of old school, all sorts of fantasy, science fiction, miniatures from all kinds of periods of fantasy and sci-fi. Yeah. Lots of critters, lots of monsters, lots of beasties.
So they should definitely have a look at
the website
and the social media and all
of those things.
Yeah. And can they add anything from the shop?
They can, yeah. I mean, what we always run our pledge managers from the Kickstarter via the Fenris web shop. So to save backers on postage as much as possible. Obviously, if you're paying a lump of money for postage, you might as well fill the parcel to the maximum that postage weights allow.
Yes.
So yeah, you will be able to fill your boots with anything else from the web shop at the same time.
Sweet. So they can do that either afterwards or just by upping the pledge.
Yeah, you can up your pledge while, you know, if there's something you fancy out of the catalogue, like a model of Great Cthulhu that's 180mm tall, for instance, so that you could be haunting the ruins, or, you know, anything else you want, you can pledge for that amount at the same time. Obviously, bigger pledges all help bump the total, and it unlocks more new stuff for everybody as well. So.
Excellent. Good. So you do figures. Are there figures in this Kickstarter, or is it all just terrain?
There are figures in this Kickstarter. So we've got some miniatures that are being overdue for release, but kind of looking for a theme. We always like to try and do releases themed together. So we've already unlocked some Rubble City adventurers. So there's some classic old school fantasy type adventurers. We've already got some add-ons from our last non-Kickstarter, our last crowdfunder, which was off platform, from our Weird World range, which is a whole range of post-apocalyptic fantasy anthropomorphic animals.
They are very cool as well.
Thank you. So everything from a timber wolf bounty hunter to an ankylosaur bodyguard, which can all be added onto your pledge as well. We've got, assuming we can unlock them, we've got trolls, we've got goatkin, beastmen, we've got another adventure or two, and possibly some other stuff depending on how well the campaign goes.
So it's definitely worth keeping an eye out if you
definitely
already think I have more terrain than I could shake a stick at. Terrain. You can get in for the models and then probably go, screw, I'm going to get some terrain as well. You can
pledge for as little, I think the smallest pledge on the Kickstarter is £5, and you can go all the way up to however much you want to spend. Yep. So yeah, you don't have to pledge for a set of 3 buildings. You can just buy 1 building, you can just buy some of the scatter, you can just buy objective markers, or just miniatures. Just
say like some of the roof bits, or if you just think that goes with what I've got.
Exactly,
But then what's extra cool is if you go for those massive pledges, because you get like a credible savings.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's there like, come on, come on.
The top pledge is, I believe we priced it at £350, but for that you're getting at the minute at least £160 worth of freebies added in, and it's only going to get bigger as the campaign gets bigger. So
nice. Of this whole campaign, do you have a favourite bit, like a favourite type or particular model?
Out of everything we've got in this campaign that's new, I think probably the Condemned Privy, which is a building that's got a nice amount of weather damaged render kind of falling off the brickwork. So you can still see the brickwork and the blockwork, but it's also partially rendered as well.
What do you mean by rendered?
So the kind of, I mean, depending on the period that your building was made, it would be plaster or lime or mud, actually applied on the surface of brickwork to either protect it from the weather or to just prettify it, just to make it look, fashion certainly. The kind of thing you see on Tudor buildings in between the timber work is render, or on modern buildings where they've got brickwork and they'll put a plaster coating or that kind of thing on the outside.
That's another extra sort of texture.
It's just another texture. Again,
it's
there. It's sculpted in a way that, a couple of washes and a little bit of dry brushing, and the detail just leaps off the model and looks, I think, really good.
It does. It's super cool. When is this Kickstarter on till, if people want to get in?
It's running for another few days yet. We finish on a week today, which is the 26th.
Something like that. Yeah. I have a feeling it ends on Sunday, not to know your Kickstarter better than you.
You may be right, but I think it's Monday because of the weird Kickstarter date run over thing. But
so you should definitely back it this week.
You should definitely back it this week, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming to Bad Squiddo HQ. As you can, if anyone's noticed in the background, it's very Bad Squiddo-y.
Surrounded by Bad Squiddo, yeah.
It's to intimidate.
The point of having to wear a shirt.
Made him wear the shirt. So thank you very much, and yes, I will be following this very closely, of course. And anyone watching, you should go check it out. Go on fenrisgames.com.
That's the one.
Fenris, very active as Fenris Games on Twitter.
Yep.
There's also Facebook. There's a little group like I have with Baggy's Cave called the Fenris Games Loyalty Club.
Yep.
And Annie, am currently spamming it, as well as a bit of Ian as well, spamming it all over the internet. So if you see it, give it a little like and comment and help us actually get the word out there as well. You know what it's like.
It's all good.
Sweet. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.